Hey teachers, Cameron Stark here, and I'm excited to show you how to make a video lesson. I've been teaching math for 8 years, and about 7 years ago I started making video lessons for my students. But it wasn't until the last year or two that I really figured out a process that worked well for me to actually make those videos. I want to share that 5-step process with you right now. Here's the first step. Plan the unit. Decide how many topics there will be and how many lessons, and many times a textbook will help. Step 2, document each lesson. That means you have a working document that includes each lesson in your unit, and it's all typed up. Well, it doesn't have to be, but you'll see why it's super helpful if it is later. Step 3, work each lesson. All right, so we have these lessons in a document. So we have to print them out and then work each lesson as if you were teaching that lesson to students. So if you have a definition, write out that definition. If you have an example, work out the example, every single step. Or if you have some rant that you're going to go on like you would do live in class, then write out some bullet points or main things that you'll say. Notice that steps 1 through 3 are really how to plan lessons as a teacher, not really how to make a video lesson. But it's super helpful to have all that planned out. All right, now step 4, design a template. It could be something super simple, but design something so you'd have consistency throughout your video that you are creating. And then finally, step 5, actually create the video or videos. Now, if you like to learn about those 5 steps, keep watching. If you like to skip around a little bit just to focus on step 3 or step 4, then go ahead and do that. The rest of this video is an overview of each of those 5 steps. If you'd like to see more detail, then I'll have a video focusing on each step individually. Step 1, plan the unit. It doesn't matter what class you're teaching, include the name of that class or course in your header. And the unit that you're planning right now, include that as well. That unit name could be pulled directly from a chapter in a textbook. The topics can also be pulled from a textbook. Sometimes they're a little bit tricky though, like in a history textbook. You're not really sure when the first topic ends and the next one begins. The next thing I focus on is how many days I think it'll take to teach that specific topic and whether that should be 1 or 2 lessons. Now this is a little bit more difficult, but when you're in the thick of it, you start to figure out a process and it usually works out well. Now, just a little note about the form of this document. I created it using tables, which I really enjoy using in my documents because you could use all the space vertically and horizontally. And so I created a table, and when I first started using a document like this, I did not have a notes column. So start out with just using days, topic, dates. And for now, we're not using the dates column because number 1, we're not really sure if our estimation of days is accurate. And number 2, if we're creating video lessons, we could decide when those are assigned or watched later on. About the assignment guide, I don't really use this for video lessons. It's just there for when I teach in class, and it's usually there for the students. And that's it for the overview. There's way more to planning a unit than what I just shared with you. So if you want to learn more about that, check out my video that focuses on that. Step 2, document each lesson. What you see are 2 documents. There's one for each lesson, lesson 1A and lesson 1B. Now these are just 2 lessons out of a total of 6 or so in this particular unit, and each page, each lesson represents 1 day or 1 video lesson. So 1A, for example, I documented the lesson. I have targets, vocabulary, review, motivate, which I sometimes use, and the instruct portion, which is the main part of the lesson. Just like the unit document, I also use tables, which I find really beneficial, especially if I want to edit stuff, I could just tab through them. Let's focus on the instruct portion of lesson A, where you see average velocity. Now this is the first idea I'd share in a video lesson. Instantaneous is the next idea, limits is the third. So I might split those into slides. But for average velocity, notice right below it, I just give a little description of what I'm doing. I'm doing a review of how to calculate average velocity. That's what we'll be doing. And then notice instantaneous velocity. Explanation of the concept of calculating, so on and so forth. So it's a narrative of what's happening, but really the main thing that I would show in a video lesson is simply what's in those boxes, average velocity and the example. For the limits revisited idea down at the bottom, Newton invented fluxions. I may or may not include that in the video, but the main thing is the example. To create a video lesson, we certainly don't need all of this information, but if you're doing video lessons and teaching a live course, it's really helpful to have both. Step 3, work each lesson. I planned the unit, I documented my lesson. Wow, that was a lot of work. Now I'm going to print each of my documents that I'm going to create a video lesson for, and then I'm going to work it as if I'm going to teach it the very next day. I also like to take notes as if I'm a student and I'm sharing those with my classmates. Essentially what I want is students to write what I write, but not write what I type. So let's get a little closer look at lesson 1A so you can see some of the stuff that I wrote, and that'll show up in a video lesson. And then lesson 1B, notice that there's actually a lot to write here, so I'm going to struggle a little bit with my video lesson. But also, if I'm creating this document for students to take notes in, maybe I should use an example that doesn't include decimals. Now that I put all that planning into this, I feel really confident about delivering the video lesson. Step 4, design a template. Here I am in the Explain Everything app, so I can explain to you how to create a template such as this one for a video lesson. Now we don't have to use this app to do this. There are plenty of other things we could do, but it's just a great way to do all the things that I want to do, which includes the template as well as do the screencast, as well as create a video about how to create a video on the app. Okay. What you see in front of you is a title page that I created for all of my lessons. So I'll use it in each one. And on this page, the next one, is a really similar version of that, but this would be used for all of the different ideas in the lesson. So each subsequent slide will have this. And I like to keep one idea per slide, as you can see in the bottom left, the slides, so that there's plenty of space to work and I'm never searching for more space to do what we're doing. All right, so let's start with the star and then I'll explain some of the corners to you. So I'll create a new slide at the bottom and Explain Everything as this nifty shape feature that you could choose all the shapes that you want to make, but it also has this automatic shape maker based on just drawing a shape yourself. So if you draw it, it could match the shape. Oh no, let's try again. There we go. Now it has this selection tool on right now, which means I can move it around or make it bigger or smaller. So I'll make it big. Now I want to do the title of the unit that I'm working on. All right, so let's call it Intro to Cats. It's going to be an awesome unit, I'm telling you. Notice what happens when I click the selection tool and then I click the star. Oh, I'm sorry, the info tool. If I click these objects, they're grouped together. So what I want to do is ungroup them so that I could just move this Intro to Cats in the center and make it a little bit bigger. And I'll click the info tool and tap each object again and group them. And then the pointer tool, and I can move that all around together. I could always ungroup that if I want to. So I'll move that to the side for now. And then what I like to do in the corners, or just in any sort of way that I feel drawn to as far as art goes, is include some of the topics that I'm going to talk about, whether that is a word or a shape or a drawing or anything. So in mine, I did just 3 different notations that we use in the Intro to Calculus. But for us, let's just do this. And when you just write, it creates an object that I can move around. And then I'll just put that in the corner. And I like to do this because the second idea is that. It's because, you know, when you're watching a show and in their intro, they include scenes from like episode 5 or episode 8 that you don't know what they mean yet, but you see some of the foreshadowing. It's kind of cool. So the third idea is other. And so when we get there, so like let's say lesson 1, hey everybody, this is lesson 1. We're going to talk about this. And you could actually record that animation in this app. And then you're in lesson 2, you save the same template, and you're like, all right, we're going to talk about that. And you move that around and it could be part of that. And then students will see. All right, so let's see here. Wrapping this up, I basically have my title page here, Intro to Cats. And then what I'll do in the bottom left is I'll click Edit, tap that slide, duplicate it. I'm done with that. And then I'll go to the next slide, 404, and then I'll make that smaller. This will be all of my subsequent pages for the different ideas. And then what I'll do now is I'll go to the settings and I'll just click, template so I know. And when I start a new video lesson, I'll choose this template. And I'll save it as a new one so I don't overwrite it. All right, and so that's how you create the template for any video lesson that you want to do, and you can get super creative or keep it super simple like this one. Step 5, create the video. I have my template and now I'm ready to create my first video lesson. I duplicated the template and renamed it. Here it is. I know, you're expecting Intro to Cats. Sorry. On this title page, what you could do is record a little welcome message like this. Hey students, welcome to Intro to Calculus. It's going to be awesome. Woo! Pause, and now you could see everything that you did. Super cool. All right, now I'm going to go to the next page, and this is the page I'll use for the rest of my lesson, which is going to be 3 slides. In a moment, I'll show you what those are. Now, I want to create a little title, title for this particular lesson, which is tangent lines, and you could get as fancy or not as you like. And I think using the text tool on the right is good for this too, but no biggie. All right, now I want to duplicate this page so that I don't have to keep writing tangent lines. So I do that by tapping and duplicating, and I might do a few more times. Now I have a lesson document, which I'm going to insert using this button, File. It's in my Google Drive. It has 11 pages, but I only want to include 1 page. And maybe that's what your document is, 1 page or 2 pages. I'm going to keep it unlocked so I can move it around. And here it is. There's tangent lines. Now I don't want this to rotate, so I press the I button, tap on the object, and lock the rotation. Now I can move it around without it being rotated. What I'm going to do here, instead of retyping the stuff that I've created, is I'm just going to copy it. So here's the clipping tool. If you press it again, you get this X-Acto knife thing, which is super cool. But I'm going to use the rectangular tool because I have a rectangular shape that I'm copying. So I'm copying that text, and then do it again, and I'm copying the example. Okay, wonderful. Press the X tool. We don't need this document anymore. And then the info tool, I don't want this to rotate, so I'll lock the rotation on those 2 things. Now I can move this around without it being rotated and make it bigger or smaller, however big I want it, and make the example bigger as well. I could stack these on top of each other if I want to, but this is similar to the students' notes, so I'll do it like that. Okay, what I'm going to do next is actually show you how I'll record the information for the lesson. And I'm just going to do the average velocity. The first thing I'm going to do is talk through my notes, and I have them in front of me on paper. So here goes, I'll record myself. All right, so first we're going to talk about tangent lines, and I need to share a definition, one that we talked about before, average velocity, which is the rate of change. It's given by the change in position divided by the change in time, which is the same as delta S over delta T. Notice how, so I'm done with that part. Notice how I left some silence at the end here so I could clip it if I want to. So I'm going to clip like a second or so off there with this trash with the arrow tool. And then I go back to the beginning, which I could also do with the rewind button. And now I'm going to type what I said, but I'm going to mute myself so you don't hear my air conditioning or dog or cat or whatever. And I'm going to press record and I'll hear myself what I just said. All right, so first we're going to talk about tangent lines, and I need to share a definition, one that we talked about before, average velocity, which is the rate of change. It's given by the change in position. And I pause myself there so I could actually write. I know, especially for this longer word, I can't write as fast as I could speak. So I'm writing change in position over change in time. And I paused it like right in between, like right after I said position, so that it shows up as they're hearing position and then change in time. All right, now I press record, and then I'm going to write live delta S over delta T divided by the change in time, which is the same as delta S over delta T. Pause. Notice there's some kind of blank space at the bottom here, which is totally fine. I'll leave that. It's always good to have a little margin. Now I'll go back to that point where I did the change in position part, and I'll just let you listen to it. Pressing play. It's given by the change in position divided by the change in time, which is the same as delta S over delta T. Cool. And I pause there and take a breather, look at my example. I know that this stuff is correct and I could record from there. Even if I mess up the example, I could go back to this 21-second spot. And that's how you do that. So many things you could do from here using, different shapes and insert various emojis, hilarious, awesome stuff. And you could move all sorts of things. It's great. So then I'll go to my next slide, do the next concept, teach it, and then check my work and go back to the first slide and see how it kind of all connects. And now when you create slides, there's also like a 2-second spacer in between each one, which is kind of cool too. Okay, when I'm done with all that, I like to include the first title page. I duplicate it and add it as my last page as well. And then I click this export button at the top right. Export will just make it on my device, and then create web video link will allow me to share this video online, YouTube or just electronically in whatever fashion. All right, like I said, so much more to this, but that's the basics. Those are the 5 steps I use to make a video lesson. Thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like more detailed videos on each of the steps, check out my YouTube channel.